the study of ancient literature, there is a distinct anomaly regarding three specific manuscripts. We have three separate authors writing independently, yet producing identical sequences of Greek vocabulary and grammar, matching word for word across entire paragraphs. These three texts are the Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke. This diagram maps three columns of text to illustrate why these are called the Synoptic Gospels. Synoptic is a term derived from the Greek roots syn, meaning together, and optic, meaning seeing. But the pattern often fractures. You will find passages where Matthew and Luke match perfectly, but Mark goes entirely dark, containing completely different text or offering no data at all. Then suddenly, all three diverge into different structural layouts. Biblical scholars classify this specific tension between verbatim agreement and structural divergence as the synoptic problem. This specific pattern of verbatim agreement and structural divergence indicates a shared literary origin. These texts are clearly sharing data. Identical grammatical structures across different authors strongly imply the existence of a shared foundational source code. These accounts were compiled decades after the actual events, relying on a vast network of early oral traditions and fragmented written records circulating in the first century. To understand how they selected and arranged that data, we rely on source criticism, the analytical method used to map textual relationships and uncover the prior sources an author utilized. By applying this method, we can see that the Synoptic Gospels form a highly engineered, interconnected literary network. To understand the historical subject they are documenting, we must reverse engineer the exact mathematical and textual formulas these authors used to compile their accounts. The four-document hypothesis starts with Markan priority, arguing the Gospel of Mark was written first. The first evidence is length. Mark is significantly shorter. Second, almost all of Mark's raw data is absorbed directly into Matthew and Luke. Mark also features an urgent, action-driven grammatical style, specifically his frequent use of the Greek word euthys, meaning immediately. If Mark wrote his account after Matthew and Luke, it would mean he chose to omit vast amounts of their critical historical and theological information. Establishing Mark as the earliest text explains the shared narrative spine across all three books. Mark serves as the core historical framework that Matthew and Luke both built upon. However, Markan priority leaves a data gap. There are roughly 200 verses of teachings shared identically by Matthew and Luke that are completely absent from the Gospel of Mark. This diagram introduces a second source document to explain that gap, called Q, from the German Quelle, meaning source. Q was likely a shared repository of sayings, either oral traditions or lost writings, bypassing Mark entirely. The existence of this Q source accounts for the verbatim textual agreements between Matthew and Luke in the specific areas where Mark provides zero data. Even with Mark and Q, we still find textual outliers. Matthew and Luke both contain unique historical data and specific parables found nowhere else in the biblical record. Looking at this model, we add node M for material unique to Matthew's community and L for data unique to Luke's. We can now express their construction as clear equations. Matthew equals Mark plus Q plus M. Luke equals Mark plus Q plus L. The four-document hypothesis provides a complete mathematical model, mapping the flow of historical data from varied origins into two independent texts. This process relies on redaction, the deliberate editorial process of selectively arranging source data to target a specific audience. Matthew utilized his specific equation, Mark plus Q plus M, to engineer a text aimed explicitly at a first-century Jewish demographic. He took the raw data from those three sources and restructured it into 5 distinct, long teaching blocks. This 5-part structure was designed to parallel the Torah. Matthew presents Jesus theologically as the new Moses, delivering a new law. Matthew's unique M source allowed him to prioritize specific metrics that his audience demanded, the precise fulfillment of Old Testament prophecies. The Gospel authors engineered their source code to construct specific, highly targeted theological arguments for their cultural contemporaries. Some critics argue that because the Gospels contain variations in details and timelines, their historical reliability is compromised. A famous example used to support this critique is the healing of the blind men at Jericho. This split screen visualizes a geographic contradiction. Matthew states the healing occurred as Jesus was leaving Jericho. Luke records that it happened as he was entering the city. There is also a numerical contradiction. Matthew clearly mentions 2 blind men, while Luke focuses on only 1. If you judge the synoptics strictly as modern chronological biographies, these variations appear to be errors that break the narrative. However, applying spatial and historical analysis resolves the conflict. This is the geographical reality of Jericho in the 1st century. There were actually 2 adjacent sites known as Jericho, the ruins of the Old City and the newly built Roman city. This map traces a path between the 2 locations. A person leaving the Old City would simultaneously be entering the new city. Both Matthew and Luke are geographically accurate based on their specific vantage point. The numerical discrepancy operates on the same logic. Luke isolates one specific blind man, perhaps the one who spoke, which does not logically preclude the presence of a second man recorded by Matthew. Because Matthew and Luke relied on independent sources, their accounts provide overlapping multi-angle forensic perspectives. The authors designed the Gospels as theological portraits, rather than exhaustive chronological modern biographies. Structural divergence is the expected result when 4 different authors engineer distinct theological frames for a single historical subject. The early church understood this architectural framework, representing these 4 distinct perspectives with 4 ancient symbols. Matthew is the lion, the Jewish king, and Mark is the ox, the servant. Luke is the man, presenting humanity to the Greeks, and John is the eagle, soaring above the narrative to present the divine Son. While John's Gospel operates outside the synoptic network, it completes this 4-fold perspectival view. The 4-document hypothesis reveals a rigorously transmitted, multi-layered history, unified in its historical subject, but beautifully distinct in its theological design.